Welcome gallery, staff, councillors and those watching online. I would like to open the Council's ordinary meeting of 19th of October 2021 with acknowledgement of country. Richmond Valley Council recognises the people of the Bundjalung Nations as custodians and traditional owners of this land, and we value and appreciate the continuing culture connections to lands, their living culture and their unique role in the life of this region in the past, present and future. Mr General Manager, could you say the prayer, please?
Dear Lord, we meet to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognise our responsibility to the past and the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. Amen.
Amen. Public access and question time. I believe there's been no request, Mr General Manager.
Yeah, nothing received.
And apologies, I have one from Councillor Cornish, so I could get a mover for that, please.
Move. Just me.
Seconder.
Second.
Councillor Morrissey, Councillor Simpson, seconder. I'll put that. All those in favour? Carried. Item 5, mayoral minute. There's nil. Confirmations of the minutes of the 6.1, the ordinary meeting held on the 21st of September. I'll get a mover, please.
Yeah, I'll move.
Councillor Hayes, seconder. Councillor Lyons. Every councillor happy with that?
No. No, Mr Mayor. Could I ask, please, for the minutes to somehow be amended to include my concerns on item 17.1, referring to the waste to energy facility? When reading through the minutes, it looks like I've actually approved or giving support to that facility, and I think it's important that part of the minutes that there is some sort of notation to give a truer representation that there was concerns raised and that there was some time given into, talking about it from...
Councillor, I'll have to get some advice from the General Manager, but the accuracy of the minutes were the seconders, the movers of the minutes of that, and I believe that it's a true record of what happened at that meeting. So I'm sorry, but I can't change the record, and if we start adding quotes and things like that into that, that's not the record, the accuracy of the minutes. All right, Mr General Manager.
I mean, they're matters for information, so you're not actually, they're not really a decision-making report, so they're an information item. So in moving and seconding, they all go through as a group, and so really you've moved them, so they're moved for the purposes of being noted for information and being seconded for that purpose. So in effect, they're information. You're not necessarily making a decision on the content. It's merely that information we are providing for you as the governing body on where certain matters are up to. So I get the point that you're making about if people, if there's an inference there that that you moved it, so therefore you support it, or you've moved it so that it be received for information. At a future point in time, there may well be reports that come to council where a decision needs to be made, and that's obviously the point at which, as councillors, you need to, if you're not certain on your position on an item, I'd I suppose question whether you want to move or second till you have the debate. But yeah, as I say, I think backing up what the Mayor said, it was an information item. So, and I think as the Mayor said, these are really a brief overview of what's there. The minutes aren't there for us to notate the comments in the discussions that we have. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other? I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried. 6.2, minutes of the Local Traffic Committee held on the 8th of September. I'll have a mover, please.
Move that way.
Seconder?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Everyone agree with the accuracy? Put that motion in. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Matters arising out of those minutes. Has any councillor got any matters?
Yeah, just a quick question on questions on notice. Question number 2, down the bottom there, the response was, it says quotes will now be sought with a view to undertaking the southern access upgrade works as soon as possible. Anything happened?
Mr General Manager?
You refresh my memory on the southern access. What was the issue again?
Can you put your light on, please? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, we're talking about the boardwalk.
Yes.
Yes, a quote has been sought, so we're just waiting on that. We're actually getting a quote from a group that are doing some of the works in Everton at the moment. So just don't know that we've got that yet, but we've definitely pursued it. There's been a site meeting, I believe, so we'll be getting a quote and be able to bring that back.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other items? Councillor?
Yes, Mr
Simpson.
Mayor. Item 10.1, which is a notice of motion in relation to the Evans Head Ambulance Station. I was going to ask if that letter had been sent, but I did see we did get an email late this afternoon saying that that letter has been sent and a response is yet to be received. The letters are often in the matters for information, so I just wanted to raise that it has been sent and no response received as of yet.
I'll make sure that when that response comes back, both letters will be included in future minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was our plan, and that letter went a couple of weeks ago, and I think Julie picked that up, which we thought we'd better let you know that it had gone. We are having to rework the letter to the Deputy Premier, given the changes which happened. We'd actually drafted the letter, and then obviously there was some adjustments in leadership in the New South Wales government, so we're just reworking that letter to go to the new Deputy Premier, Paul Toole.
Any other matters arising? Declaration of interest. Any councillor got any specified details of any?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Morrissey?
In closed council, item 20, 20.3 and 20.7. One of the tenderers is a work colleague, and I'm just erring on the side of caution. So it's non-pecuniary.
Have enough detail for that? The reason?
Yeah. One of the tenderers is a work colleague.
Thank you.
Any other?
Mr Mayor, matters for information, 17.5, the Community Recovery and Resilience Fund. I'm the president of CowFM. I've made myself a note here not to move or second the item when it comes about, because I was guilty of that once. I guess I just want some advice, because if a councillor pulls that out to speak, then I'll leave the room. Is that correct? We just follow that procedure?
So it's in matters for information. It's probably good if you didn't move or second it. But I think also important to note that with that process, councillors have not had any involvement. We have followed the requirements of Resilience New South Wales and what other councils have been doing in dealing with that fund. We've appointed independent people to the assessment panel, and it's been a very independent process. Yeah, the outcomes of that, I have the delegated authority to approve. So I've done that, and this report has been brought to you for information, but also so that it's on the public record what the outcomes of that fund will be. So in my view, you haven't had any input, and you haven't had any input as a councillor into any of the decision making in that. So I think it's good practice that we will note that you've identified that interest, but it's not a decision making report. So I don't see the need for you to leave the room when that item comes up.
Thank you.
Any other declarations? Nil. Petitions? Nil. Item 10, notice of motion? Nil. Mayor's report on page 9, 11.1, mayoral attendances. I'll move that.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any questions? Or
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Out of
Slim pickings, I know, but September 24th, joint organisation workshop. Any pertinent points?
Yeah, look, that was the workshop. As it says, it was well, it was on Zoom, and it was like a regional waste workshop, and we had the EPA, New South Wales, Waste and Sustainable Mineral Strategy. That's what they talked about. North East Waste, Kimbrickie Resource and Recovery Centre. They're in Sydney, I believe. Is that correct? Northern Beaches. They gave a bit of a presentation. And then we had representatives from each council gave us an update of what their councils are doing with waste management. So,
Thanks, Mr Mayor. You'll have to get out a bit more.
Was there any discussion on energy to waste at that Zoom?
Mr General Manager did mention that, so I'll just ask him to talk about it. It was very interesting what some councils are doing. So, yeah.
The workshop was really focused on alternate waste treatment solutions, which is obviously what we're working through. We are in the process of preparing a market sounding or ELI process to go to the market for alternate waste treatment solutions. So that's on the back of the North Coast Waste Investment Report, which we've been working with the 13 councils along the North Coast. So we gave an update to that effect. So energy from waste is one of the options that's certainly being looked at, and going to the market gives an opportunity to see whether a facility is viable, potential, approvable in the North Coast. And obviously with the government's announcement with their energy from waste infrastructure plan, that one can happen in the Richmond Valley, but there's plenty to work through before that occurs, if it occurs. So, but it was a broader conversation about all the challenges that we all have with waste, and what we can do to minimise costs, get better, environmental outcomes, and other benefits that might come from investment in infrastructure.
And like all workshops, it was just for information. There was no decisions made, or it was just floated around the room of all different options. Very
It might be worth just mentioning, I think it's an important point is that there's the JO is on a cycle where they sort of rotate between a workshop and then a decision-making meeting, so about every 6 weeks apart. So, so the workshop's about information sharing, and then we have one where decisions are made.
Any other questions? Put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Delegates' reports, nils. Matters for determination without debate. Has any councillor got any matters they'd like to call?
15.2 and 16.3, please.
So that's 16.2 and 16.3.
15.2.
15.2, thank you.
16.3.
Yep.
15.4 and 16.1.
And I'll call 15.1. And 16.2. Any other councillors? So I believe I need a motion now for 15.3 and 16.4. Is that correct? Could I get someone to move that, please?
I'll move it.
Councillor Lyons, a seconder.
Second.
Councillor Simpson. Thank you. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. 15.1, councillors, I'd just like to talk briefly on this because it will come back for, to the next November meeting. But I think that's a very sound report of our financial statements, and it's good as a council to be seeing improvements in a lot of the areas that state government benchmarking, and we're increasing some of those levels. It's been hard times through a lot of droughts and fires and COVID, and floods, but I think council has delivered to our community a lot of projects and will in the future, and naturally we're carrying a bit of money over going forward, but I think that's understandable under those conditions. So yeah, it's a very pleasing result, and it'll now go out to the community for them to have a look at it and comment on. So just I think it's very, very good for this council where we're at this time. I'm sorry, I need a seconder.
Second.
Councillor Humphries. I won't say all that again. Any other speakers?
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor,
Humphries.
certainly is a sound report. It brought a smile to my face. And the very last on page 17, it's the submissions will be reported to the full ordinary meeting of the newly elected council. I reckon it'll bring a smile to the newly elected councillors' faces as well.
Any other councillors? Put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. 15.2, Councillor Simpson.
I'll move the recommendation.
Yeah, oh, we have a presentation first. Yep. Mr. General Manager, who have we got?
So yeah, we just have a presentation on our quarterly budget review. So over to you, Dean.
Okay, good evening, councillors. This presentation on the September quarterly budget review will include the overall movements in the budget and cash result, the proposed carryover works from last financial year, summary of the revised capital works program for the current year, and the summary of other recommended changes for the September quarter. In terms of the budget and budget summary and cash result, this table shows the overall movements from the original budget, plus proposed carryover works, plus recommended changes for the September quarter, leading to the revised budget for the year. So working through that table, total income from continuing operations has increased by $4 million to a total of $83.8 million. This is mainly due to an increase of $3.98 million in capital grants and contributions, which is mainly associated with natural disaster funding approvals. Operating expenses are increasing by $1.4 million to $69.1 million. The operating result from continuing operations has improved from a surplus of $12 million to a surplus of 14.7 million. However, the operating loss before capital grants and contributions is projected to increase from a loss of 2.22 million to a loss of 3.56 million. The capital works program has increased from 46.9 to 49.3 million. That's a net increase of 2.4 million. There's also a decrease in proposed loan borrowings of 1.11 million for the construction of Cell 6 at Namoona Landfill. The use of restricted funds has increased from 11.2 million to a total of 12.1 million. And the unrestricted cash surplus has decreased by 18,000 to a surplus of 288,000. That 18,000 is the estimated financial impact of council adopting a 3-month interest-free period on outstanding rates and annual charges from October to December this year to support the community and businesses impacted by the recent lockdowns and border closures. The proposed carryover works, there were a number of projects that weren't completed in the previous year. Delays in those works were mostly around the availability of contractors and supplies, which were impacted by COVID-19 restrictions as well as wet weather. There's $1 million in operational projects proposed to be carried forward and 5.36 million in capital projects. The major operational carryover works include $656,000 for the LED upgrade of our streetlights undertaken by Essential Energy, as well as $241,000 for works funded by the Bushfire Community Recovery and Resilience Fund. Major capital carryover works above $150,000 includes $928,000 for various natural disaster works on council's roads and bridges, $490,000 for Norton's Gap Road, north of Rambaldini's Road, $479,000 for 2 sections on Springgrove Road, $400,000 for Ellengowan Road Bridge, $337,000 for water infrastructure renewals, $278,000 for casino showground upgrades funded through the Drought Communities Program, $265,000 for JTR Small Bridge, $261,000 for Evans Head Library, as well as $238,000 for Rappville Fire Station, $199,000 for sewage infrastructure renewals, and $154,000 for unsealed roads gravel resheets. The remaining carryovers of $1.3 million are further detailed in the budget variation notes in the quarterly budget review document.
Dean, just on that one, just if you just go back one.
Yep.
Probably worth just commenting that Evans Head Library is now complete, as is the Rappville Fire Station. So some of those works that are listed there as carryovers have obviously been finished in the first quarter of this year.
Yep. And some of those natural disaster works are ongoing too, which may have been completed in some of those projects. The Capital Works program for the current year started with an original budget of 46.9 million. After the inclusion of the proposed carryover works of 5.36 million, the revised budget would have totalled 52 million. So management have performed a full review of the Capital Works program based on the capacity to deliver those works. That review has resulted in a net decrease in capital works of $2.9 million in the recommended changes for the September quarter outside of the carryover works. So the revised capital works program now totals 49.3 million. Although that's a significant capital works program still, if you combine the natural disaster projects together, there's 9 key projects or budgets in this table that account for over 50% of that capital works program. So that includes 6.5 million in various natural disaster projects, 5 million for the casino memorial pool upgrade, 3.4 for the casino showground upgrades, $3 million in general fund plant purchases, 1.89 million for Cell 6 construction at Namoona Landfill, 1.5 million in waste fund plant purchases, including 3 garbage truck replacements, 1.55 million for Woodburn Corrocky Road upgrade, 1.5 million for Rapville Common rebuild, and 1.325 million for the casino industrial land activation. The recommended changes for the September quarter outside of the carryover works: with swimming pools, 1.09 million in capital works for the casino memorial pool have been transferred to the following financial year due to revised timeframes for that project. Emergency management, 166,000 has been an increase in capital works for upgrades at the Casino Emergency Operations Centre, and that's being funded by Resilience New South Wales. As well as that, $207,000 has been included for the new fire tanker at the Ellengowan RFS station, and that's funded by Rural Fire Service grant. In sports grounds, parks and facilities, $1.9 million for the casino showground upgrade has also been transferred to next year after a review of the project timeframes. In building and maintaining roads, there's been an increase of $4.2 million in capital works as a result of natural disaster funding approvals for various roads and bridges. Some of those works we have 2 years to complete, but that 4.2 represents the works we think we'll achieve in this financial year. So when we go to do next year's budget, there will be some of those projects carrying into that year. 600,000 for Country Lane and Casino. It's been transferred to next year also due to revised timeframes. That does leave 150,000 in the current year. Also 500,000 for Richmond Terrace in Corrocky similarly has been transferred to next year, leaving 100,000 in the current year for that project. There's also been a reduction of $446,000 for the Woodburn Corrocky Road upgrade, as additional funds were expended in the previous year. In real estate development, there's been a $285,000 reduction in the Canning Drive subdivision budget due to the majority of works being completed last financial year. In waste management, there's a number of changes, with 1 million for cell capping at Namoona landfill being transferred to next year. That leaves 890 in the current year. 1.11 million for the construction of cell 6 at Namoona as well has been transferred to next year. That leaves 1.89 million in the current year, and that has also reduced proposed loan borrowings by the same amount. $400,000 for the Namoona composting facility has been transferred to next year, leaving 150 in the current year. In water supplies, there's been a net increase in capital expenditure of $196,000 following a review of the program. That's mainly due to an increase in water main replacements of $192,000. In sewage services, there's been a net decrease in capital expenditure of $176,000. That's mainly due to revised timeframes for the upgrade of some of the pump stations at Evanshead, Broadwater and Woodburn. So in conclusion, Council's budget has been adjusted to include carryover works from the previous year. Following the inclusion of those carryovers, management undertook a comprehensive review of the capital works program, and that now totals 49.3 million. As mentioned in the report to council, there is a risk that the delivery of the capital works program will be impacted by the availability of contractors and suppliers, which have been affected by recent lockdowns and border closures. Any impacts will be monitored closely, and budgets will be adjusted accordingly in future quarterly reviews or monthly budget adjustments brought to council. So in summary, council's projected financial position at year end remains satisfactory. That's the end of the presentation. Do you have any questions?
Dean, I do have a question on the quarterly budget review statement, page 15 of that, which is page 43 of our attachments. there's a number of capital expenditure items to do with water mains and reservoirs and whatnot, which have been reviewed, and quite a number removed on that page and also in the next page. I'm just wondering about the methodology for removing those. Should they be there in the first place if they're subsequently being removed?
I believe with the carryover works, the entire program was reviewed, as far as I'm aware, and that's what they believe will be done in the current year.
Ones that have been removed are just being pushed into the next financial year. Is that what's happening?
I don't know for sure, Councillor Simpson, but I believe that's the intention.
I'd be suggesting we might just ask that of our coordinator and manager to just give a bit of a briefing on that, which we can get done and provide to you. So, fair questions.
Yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Simpson, I do know that there is a number of investigations happening in water and sewer infrastructure, and as we find issues that we weren't aware of, we have to reprioritise work. So there is a fair bit of toing and froing with our capital and our maintenance planning, depending on what's on the priority list. So I would presume, but we will clarify for you, that we are chopping and changing various work programs to suit our priorities and needs at the time. But we'll clarify that in a briefing note.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I take that on board, but I guess my question is that I would think that would all be reviewed when the budget's being put together. Obviously, not that we're 1 quarter into the year, and there's significant changes. So, just wondering how that comes about.
Well, I think some of it is when things break, you go in and then it's deemed, well, if we're going to fix this, we fix, if it's a section, we fix bigger sections. So it's sort of, it can seem a bit reactive, but I suppose part of the decision making is, well, we've found something, this becomes a higher priority than what we scheduled before. So I get it that in an ideal world we'd have, fully complete asset management plans and we stick to the schedule, but when you're talking about some infrastructure that's been in the ground for, close to a century in some cases, when something breaks, you then end up doing bigger sections. So it'll always change a bit, but I think we'll get a good briefing from the team and bring it back to you.
Councillors, I need a mover and a seconder, if I can get one. Councillor Simpson moved.
And move.
Seconder. Councillor Humphries. Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
I've asked my questions now.
You can ask a question, but I thought we were going into debate, that's all.
No, I'm done.
Okay. Any other councillors? I'll put that motion and all those in favour. Thank you. Carried. Yep. Yeah. You're right, Mrs. Clark.
Councillor Humphries.
Councillor Humphries. And a unanimous. Good. Okay. 15.4, and I believe that's Councillor Hayes.
I just called it to ask a question to start off with. Lismore's contribution to the Broadwater Bridge design, when do we get that? It's all about our contribution. It doesn't mention Lismore in that.
Do you want to move it, please?
I will, yeah. I'll move the recommendation as written, yes.
Yeah. Seconder?
Second.
Councillor Simpson?
That question? Do you want to answer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's our view that given the urgency of this, is that we need to drive this, and then we'll recoup those costs later. There's an in-principle agreement that at some point the Broadwater Bridge needs to be done. So those discussions have been had, and there is a sort of informal agreement that they will come at half of the cost of that one. So our view is that we get in and get it done, and then we'll chase the costs from Lismore down the track.
I had the same question marked on page 28 where it mentions Lismore, and we have been talking to them, and that, okay, because I think we need to keep them as fully informed on every decision we make. So, and I think even today on this resolution, we need to get back to them and say that council's resolved to do that. And
It's a bit similar to the disputed Plains Bridge, which in that instance they're taking the lead on because there are these historical boundary agreements with these bridges between Lismore and Richmond Valley. So yeah, there are boundary agreements which set up, you know, who's responsible for the maintenance and then and monitoring, and then obviously it's a joint 50-50 to construction works. So we need to get the designs done so that we know what we're looking for, so we can get some grant applications ready. So yeah, we certainly don't see any issues with securing that funding as part of our partnership and our obligations under those boundary agreements.
Is there any need to include that in the recommendation? That we,
If you'd like to add it to the recommendation, I don't see an issue that whether we.
what would you like to say?
okay, the one approves the transfer of the 42,500 from Council's Road Rehabilitation Reserve to the fund to fund the design works for the Broadwater Bridge at Broadwater, and invoices Lismore for half the cost at a later date.
And how about, and note that Lismore is in the shared cost of the bridge, or something like that,
In line with.
in line with the report.
yeah,
In line with the
agreement.
boundary agreement.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Well, you won't get the money.
Okay.
In line with the boundary agreement. Just because the way that reads at the moment, you know, to share in the cost of the bridge, it's implying that, well, in that case, Lismore will fund half the bridge. So I think in the context of that, it might be worth adding that the intent here is to seek grant funding from relevant government programs. So whether there's a third item, because I think that's important to note.
You want to tell Julie?
So something like, well, we do it jointly.
Jointly,
Yeah.
joint, yeah.
That joint council grant funding applications be pursued. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Would grant funding be mentioned in that agreement, Vaughan? The
So-
boundary agreement, would there be anything in there about applying for grants or?
No, it wouldn't be. I don't think it's that specific. It's quite an elderly agreement, I think, from what I've been advised. I think Jenna's looking to incorporate it into that first one. So we'll just let them tidy up a proposed resolution so you can have a look at it.
Councillor Hayes? We there? Yep. Councillor Hayes? Okay, Councillor Simpson, the seconder. Okay, any other councillors? Want to write a reply? No? Put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. Unanimous. 61 on page 29, 16 sorry. Councillor Hayes.
Yeah, on
You,
number
you
two.
want, do you want to move it?
Yeah, I'll move it as it is at the moment, but I'll
Okay.
see how we go from debate.
Seconder? Councillor Humphries? Councillor Hayes?
With the clause, what is it, clause 5.22 and the list of exclusions or inclusions that we're going to put in there, it actually says about caravan parks on page 33 on flood-prone land. Are we're going to, if we exclude them, we've got no chance of caravan parks being established in flood-prone areas in Woodburn and the Lower River in the future. So I'm just wondering if we should be including caravan parks in that. And maybe even ecotourism facilities. Maybe they should be pulled out of there.
Yeah, Mr. Yeah.
Through you, Mr Mayor. These aren't prohibitions. These land use types are still able to be established on these sites, but considerations need to be given for flood impacts. So it doesn't prohibit these land uses being established, it just puts another layer of considerations on whether they are appropriate developments and that people's lives and property aren't at significant risk and whether they can be evacuated if there's length of time for a flood event. So you'd say in a river or an estuarine environment that, you know, we get a fair warning with floods. So if a flood was coming, we could quite easily get people out of certain circumstances. Like, for example, our Corokai Caravan Park, we know the flood is coming. We have several days before the greatest impacts are actually felt in Corokai. So we can effectively manage that park by getting people to move out. We put the electricity boxes up. We move the office. It's on skids. We remove that. We've done that in recent flood events. So it's about considering the impacts. It's not about prohibiting those land use. It's putting an extra layer of consideration for risk.
Which would have to happen anyway.
We do it anyway.
Just, yeah, you would, common sense. You wouldn't just go and put a caravan there and let people stay there all the time, because when a flood hit, then you've got a problem. So you're better off identifying that to start with and getting those, like a plan, in order. So.
It's just a little bit odd that some of the other things that are listed there are things that you probably wouldn't want in flood areas. Hazardous storage establishments, sewage systems, water supply systems, which most of them would be, you know. I just thought that they were trying to delete them from the flood-prone land, but yeah, I read it wrong.
So, in effect, what's the practical outcome of adopting this, because the concern is that if we put an additional layer of complication on trying to get, say, a stopover caravan park in Woodburn, that it just becomes all too difficult. So the concern is, if we adopt this, does that make that more difficult than it already is?
Director Jones?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I don't believe so, because we already currently consider the flood impacts in situations such as what we're talking about. This actually, adopting this clause, and it's up to council, it's your prerogative, this is actually going to formalise what we already do and consider in a merit-based assessment when we get a development application to assess. So it just this clause will just formally set out a process and things to consider. We already do it, so I don't see any additional impact on any future development, because we're already undertaking this type of risk assessment when we assess any development applications.
And it says that on page 34, council already considers the likely impacts of floods, including rare large floods in certain locations. Therefore, the inclusion of clause 5.22 is consistent with existing assessment processes. So it's just formalising it, as Director Jones said.
Can I point out too, the diagram that's been included on page 31, to me clearly explains that clause 5.22 is considering the flood impacts from the flood planning level to the PMF, which is the probable maximum flood. So these are very rare flood events, but they do happen. These are the really big things. So clause 5.22, the planning and merit-based implications are considered for those really, really big flood events. All the flood events that we're quite used to having in the Northern Rivers probably wouldn't be above that flood planning level, those ones that we see regularly. But the clause 5.2 is for the larger, rarer, more significant events.
Councillor Hayes?
Yeah, I just might throw another question out there. So with that little drawing there, so clause 5.22 mainly consolidates what we do now. So what we're doing now is harder on building in those flood zones than what it is anywhere else. You're more crucial on your assessment because of that, 1 in 100 year flood level. Is that correct? And now, if we adopt this, we will make that, basically policy.
I don't think it's harder because we already do it, but we do consider those larger impact
that's
events.
What I'm
Yeah.
Why do we already do it?
I think we do it to manage risk and to minimise, the impact on people or at least, and I think a lot of it I would assume ends up in, doesn't necessarily mean that the development doesn't happen, but there may be conditions of consent included to, I suppose, reduce the risk of impact if those events do occur.
Correct. One of the conditions we might place on a development would be that they have an evacuation plan that has been consulted with, like in a flood event, would be consulted with the SES, and they have an approved evacuation plan. So anyone on that site, say in a caravan park scenario, knows that here are the triggers and this is the actions that we take at those triggers. So that mitigates the risk because we have some assurity and safety that the people on site will know what to do in the event of a flood, and it minimises the risk of harm to people, and they can evacuate before it becomes an issue for them.
Councillor Hayes?
What clause are we working to now? With your assessments, what's the current clause?
We
Dr.
don't
Jones?
currently have a clause in the LEP, but we have flood modelling that we use, and as under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act and regs, we've got a merit-based assessment. So we consider risk and environmental factors as part of that assessment already, using our flood modelling.
Any other councillors?
Happy to go with the recommendation. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, happy to move the recommendation as written.
I have a mover, and you moved it, and I have a seconder, Councillor Humphries. Is that correct, Councillor Humphries?
Mr Mayor, I was just ask a question around the consultation engagement that will be done by DPI, and then of course some in-house with council, so that the results of Richmond Valley Council's Facebook pages or website, that will go back into that DPI engagement strategy, and then we'll get the results of all of that as well. Is that?
Director Jones?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that's how I understand it, Councillor Humphries.
Done. Councillor Hayes?
No, all good to go.
Put that motion in. All those in favour? Carried. 16.2, I'll move that.
Second.
Councillors, just to make note that I think this name of for this road of Victory Camp Road, I think it's a very worthy and great name out there. The Victory Camp is was a very interesting chapter in that area's history. A lot of people don't know about it, but it was a very big thing around the war years, and I think it'll be well accepted by a lot of the people who lived through that era and understand the meaning behind Victory Camp Road. So I think it's very appropriate. Any other speakers? I'll put that motion then. Carried. 16.3 on page 38, Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Just a couple of questions, Mr Mayor, through you, Mr Mayor. What is the current state out there at Box Ridge? Who actually currently pays rates, or do we actually currently collect the rates on that land, and under what's and then what will change under what's proposed?
Through you, Mr Mayor. Currently the Land Council pays the rates, and the proposal is to subdivide those lots so that they become essentially rate generating properties in their own right.
So the current residents of those dwellings, do they pay the Land Council for the rates, or is it just the Land Council that are paying them themselves?
Does the Land Council pay rates or just water and sewer?
I'd have to check that one. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, they actually pay rates and water and sewer.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
How's it rated? As what? Residential land, just one parcel?
I believe so, yeah, it's one parcel at the moment.
Can I just ask a further question? Obviously, I think, look, I'm not against what's proposed, but I think there's quite a bit to be worked through in terms of where this ends up. The recommendation point 3 just says, notes that a report on outcomes will be brought back to a future meeting of council. Is that outcomes of the General Manager's discussions on the project, and not outcomes in terms of we've made some decisions and this is what they are?
There's no authority in this resolution for me to make decisions. So the intent of the resolution, and this came to us only very recently, and we had to have some quick discussions, but there was certainly a need to get it, I suppose, not necessarily in principle approval, but an intent to engage in these conversations, come up with clear benefits of doing this, both for that community but also understanding benefits, but also, you know, liabilities for council and what we need to manage. So we've still got a bit to work through and have conversations about. So the intent was really to let you know that this was happening, but that there's quite a bit to work through, and then bring when it's at the next phase, bring it back to council, and there'd need to be further resolutions.
When that report comes back, will it address such things as headworks charges and section 94As, all that kind of stuff, if they're going to go down the track to a 13-lot subdivision or 17-lot subdivision?
Director Jones?
With regards to developer contributions and water and sewer headworks charges, etc., they would be assessed at the time of an application. So if these lots were to be created in a Torrens title scenario as proposed, given that infrastructure is already existing, there's no mechanism for council to retrospectively charge developer contributions and levies. Any future development would be subject to our rules and requirements with regards to contributions.
I noticed in there too, there's a paragraph on building setbacks as an issue with how far the houses are already established off the road frontages. So that could be a problem.
Potentially it could be, but given there's an established building line out there, we would have to consider that, and it would potentially be a DCP variation should there be any future development. We could address it in a Torrens title subdivision as an existing, existing infrastructure, but any future increase in housing out there, for example, that would be part of a merit-based assessment as per the DCP.
Are the 13 proposed residential lots already got houses on them, or is there less than 13? There is 13 out there, so they're all established.
They're looking to capitalise, or not capitalise, capitalise will take the opportunity of this funding program, which has certain parameters, one of which is for the local council to come in and play that role of place infrastructure manager. It has happened in some other communities with some success, so I suppose we're looking to let you know this is happening, go into it with an open mind, but obviously cover our risks and these scenarios. So I think it's good to have those questions, and helps us take all that into account as we move forward with them.
The intent of the approach is around giving the land council some certainty that they can lodge a DA, essentially. Yeah.
Any other speakers? Other issues? Want to write a reply, Councillor Simpson? I'll put that then. All those in favour? Carried. Unanimous. Item 17 on page 42, matters for information. Could I get a mover, please?
Moved.
Councillor Morrissey, seconder. Councillor Lyons, thank you. Councillor Morrissey. Councillor Lyons. Any other councillors?
Mr Mayor, I just had a question on the customer experience report. I was curious to ask how the City of Hobart Council became interested in also is having a concierge in their council. How did that experience come, or how did that comment come about?
Director Jones.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, it was a phone call out of the blue, so I'm not quite sure how it actually eventuated, but our concierge, Deirdre Coe, did call back the City of Hobart and had a lengthy conversation with them about what she does in her role and the pros and cons and how it's worked for council. It is seen as a very positive initiative. If any sort of before pre-COVID, when we would workshop and speak to our colleagues in local government, everyone was very interested in the approach that was taken by Richmond Valley Council with our concierge process. So I think there are a number of councils that have implemented a similar role in various forms. So yeah, I'm not quite sure about the the connection of how it actually came about, but yeah, we reached Hobart.
Thank you.
The other councillor Hayes?
Two questions around item 17.5. The first question I'll ask, when I ask the second question, councillor Humphries might want to take the opportunity to... No? No, I think so. The first one is on the, what's the Tomorrow Man and Tomorrow Woman evening for parents from the preschool? What's that one? You know what it is? I can work out all the others, but...
I'm having a mental blank. You remember?
Which one is it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, from memory, and I've the details of their proposal has escaped me. It was an Aboriginal cultural awareness information sort of evening, as I understand it. But if you'd like those details, I can certainly provide them to you. We can email you out afterwards.
So as far as you know, it's just an evening.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I'd suggest it might be more than just one evening.
Well, it looks like it should be.
I think it's a program which would be sort of evening sessions, but we can provide you with that information. Obviously, we will announce the outcomes of these and provide a bit more detail on those that were successful.
And just the next question is just generally around the ratings, and it does refer to the last ratings and the distribution of the $24,526 that was left over. The men's shed, the Evans Head men's shed rated 55, the two above them rated 57, and you still had $24,000 to expend, but you split it between the two nines, which I don't object to. But they're going to feel a little bit missed out if they only missed out by 2 rating points and got none of that money at all. If I was on that committee, I would have looked at that, I think. But I'm just wondering what the, what surrounds that. How come it didn't go down? And we're always about spreading the money further. That money could have been.
I think they
split 3 ways, and they would have got theirs.
Yeah, and I suppose then you can argue, well, we should have given a bit more to those further down the list as well.
Their rating's quite a bit away, though.
Yeah.
Not just 2 points.
True.
Yeah.
I think part of it. I think my awareness, obviously those 2 that ranked 9 aren't getting their full funding that they needed.
No, I can see that.
So the decision was made to at least give them, I think they went back to them to say, look, we can't give you all of it. Is this program an all or nothing, or can you do something with partial funding? And I think indications were given that obviously the preference was full funding, but partial funding.
And is it odd that the 2 amounts for the wireless station and the Rapville surrounds is exactly the same, but they applied for different amounts?
Just split the money in half.
Oh, so that is the split of the
So the
24.
balance was 24,000, whatever that adds up to, 526.
Sorry, I misunderstood that. That is the split of the remaining money.
Correct.
Oh, okay. I thought they were funded to that and they were getting more.
No. They wanted.
Sorry, I'll
Yeah.
withdraw that.
So they wanted a bit
Completely
more.
misunderstood it. Thank you.
Yep. No worries.
Any other questions? Matters for information? I'll just refer to page 46 with the Norton's Gap road. I think that $4.3 million just shows the enormity of that job. And I know we do put a lot of information out about it, and especially in our newsletters and that, and I know the community is appreciative of it, but I think we need to keep going on with letting be some way that what is happening there. And I think when people see that figure, I don't know, but I think we use about $1 million a kilometre for a road. Is that roughly the ballpark? So you've got like 4 kilometres of road that we usually reseal, all in about 200 or 300 metres. So, yeah. So it's going to be a major job.
It's less than 100 metres.
Less than 100 metres. So
it could potentially cost us 4.3. It may. It's an upper limit.
Yeah.
The other thing probably to note was in the earlier briefing, there's also roadworks planned for Norton's Gap Road, just on the other side of the hill.
Oh, yep.
That's that project that,
That's the one where
that
some
Dean
land was-
mentioned.
yeah.
It's about a $600,000 program which is scheduled to commence towards the end of the third quarter of this financial year. So obviously looking to get that work done while the road's closed.
Closed, yeah. And page 48, on the Willocks Bridge, is there any idea when that will start?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Director Zeller?
The council will expect a tender report in February with an estimated start time of March next year.
That's most probably what I wanted to hear, because I know it's urgent, but over Christmas having that bridge closed, it would have, with all the traffic going to Evans Head and from the region, I think it would have been very inconvenient, so I think that's good to leave it till after Christmas. Thank you. Councillor Humphries.
If I could just make a comment, going back to Norton's Gap Road, what will be the bucket of money that we'll need to actually maintain or do the maintenance on the road that's being damaged? You know, the back road that we're using, it's hugely deteriorating at a fairly fast rate, and there's a real risk on those back roads, driving on those back roads as well. I don't know the number of times that even though council put those new double lines going out the back road to Carryover Road, that one hill, I don't know, they just don't stay over their own side of the road coming over that blind hill. It's crazy. I just hope that we get out of all of this, you know, back to having the road back to the plan without somebody being seriously hurt.
We had in the early, when the road failed, we had a lot of inquiries and concerns from the community. Is that still happening, or is it?
Oh, look, I think the work that we did was well received. With the line marking in particular, it wasn't line marked, and so when it's not line marked, people tend to wander over the road a bit more. But that line marking went in. But I think, you know, my observations, it'd be nice if people just slowed down a bit. But it doesn't matter what speed sign you put up, people don't necessarily take notice of that either. But it's a concern, as is Springgrove Road. Similarly, people are going Springgrove Road. I think it's, in some sections, probably a higher risk. So you're right, we've increased our maintenance levels, regularity through there with potholes and other things, but you're right, the road is deteriorating. But I don't necessarily have an answer for that either.
Any other debate on the matters for information? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried. Unanimous. Page 67, questions on notice was a nil. Questions in writing for the next meetings. Any councillor got any questions in writing?
Yeah, I've got one. I've already given it to Julie, but I'll read it out. It says, with reference to the so-called Desert Storm event that took place in Evans Head on Monday the 4th of October 2021, can council supply information to residents that were affected by the dust that eventuated from the construction site for the Thyme Lifestyle Resort located behind Kurrajong Street in Evans Head, explaining to them their possible course of action to get their properties cleaned, inclusive of names and direct phone or email contacts of the developer and the construction company responsible for the works.
We have a question. Do you want to take that on notice, Mr General Manager, or would you like to answer it now?
Oh, no, look, I'm happy to answer that rather than wait another month. Yeah, look, it was obviously an event that caused a lot of concern in the community, as it did to us. I was contacted that afternoon by you, Councillor Hayes, so thanks for that. We acted immediately, got in touch with the development team. Unfortunately, they weren't able to respond as quickly as everyone would have liked on that public holiday Monday afternoon. From our perspective, as obviously the regulatory authority for, you know, issuing a consent for development, that consent requires that they have management plans in place for these sorts of things, and they do have management plans. Obviously, on this occasion, they weren't able to implement it in a timely way. The forecast wasn't there for those sorts of winds, and I think it was the first occasion where they've now realised the extent of what can happen when you are filling a site with sand and with some of the winds that you do get when you're closer to the coast. So they've taken this very seriously. They're very concerned about the impact. They have, my understanding is, has certainly advised us that they've been door knocking the residents along that street and having conversations with them. So, last week I actually met with them on site along with our development engineers, manager of development. We met with Serenitas, so they own the development. We also had representatives from their design and engineering team, and also C Civil, who are doing obviously the civil works on that site. So we met with them, and they're I suppose, as far as answering the question of who do people contact, I'm happy to provide you with. I won't provide phone numbers, obviously over live stream, but I'm happy to provide that detail, and we'll have that available with our team for any residents who contact us. But they've owned it. Their issue. They're having conversations with the residents. So from the conversations I've had with them, they've taken this seriously, and we'll obviously discuss these things with residents. I know obviously there's impacts with the dust and sand particles in homes, but also in water tanks. Also aware of that as well. So they were talking through solutions. So I think it's about the residents engaging with them and outlining the impacts and having those conversations with them. So we'll pull this information together, have it available, obviously provide it to councillors so that if you get contacted, you're able to refer people directly to those involved. But Dean Walker, who's quite senior in Serenitas, was at the meeting. He indicated, they obviously have a reputation to look after. They're very excited by this project. The project will roll out over the next 3 to 5 years, as these sorts of projects do. So they want to be a good neighbour. So their intent is to rectify. So we'll provide those details, as I say, to councillors. We'll also make sure that our customer service teams and our Mid-Richmond team have the right details, and we point people in the right direction. And then if people don't feel like those remedies are adequate, we can obviously have further conversations with them.
Any other questions? Move over now to matters referred to closed committee. I need a motion to go into closed committee, please. Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Hayes seconding.
Can I ask a question on going into closed council at this point in time?
Yes.
Just wondering, like, with our ability to be so transparent with going into with our council business, and I know we've got to take some things into closed council. I'm just wondering why the first two items, the first two matters in closed council, they couldn't have been dealt with in open council.
I'm happy to just have a quick look at those two. If you, I mean, basically the principle of why tenders go into closed council is around commercial.
Yep.
Commercial advantage, disadvantage, because obviously almost all tenders have a financial component, and that can disadvantage us with similar and like tenders into the future. So I suppose that's the principle as to why that occurs. So I take your point, I suppose, with the legal services one. There isn't any financial information, but I suppose when you look at, or if I look at that report, there's some information in there that might might be of concern, whether that's to us or whether to those who bid. Because there's assessments of performance and capabilities, which they mightn't necessarily agree with or want on the public record. So that's probably the first one. The second one, yeah, so again, the second one, we've excluded the contractor. So again, there's that reputational risk. So there's a range of reasons why we do, and I suppose we're erring on the side of caution and not exposing council to, you know, those parties that are involved coming back to us and criticising our assessment process.
Yeah, my point was just that, you know, we've taken all the tenders into closed council just on recently, and I think the ones that can be left out probably should be left in open council. But, yeah, look, my legal mind's not as, you know, I'll leave council open, but it'd be nice to have, if they didn't have to go in there, why take them in there?
Yeah, look, and it might mean in some cases that we could write a report at a higher level that could be in, you can do an open council report and a closed council report. Maybe something that we can consider in the next term of council, how we do that. Obviously has a resource implication, but you're right, I think it's a fair point around, you know, transparency. So something we can contemplate and maybe you know, review and see how we do things in the next term of council.
Any other debate? Mr General Manager, has there been any written representations made regarding this meeting going to closed council? If so, could you read the representations, please?
I've not received any, no.
Are there any verbal representations from the members of the public? No? I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Thank you. Thanks for your attendance. It's appreciated.
Ben and I are going to
Alternate.
between all of them, okay? Just to let you know what we're doing.
I can't have a meeting without the General Manager. Mr General Manager, could you direct staff to read the resolutions, please? Out of closed committee.
I'll leave that to our three directors will share the journey. Thanks.
Directors.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Item 20.1, tender VP 260033, provision for legal services. Council resolved that 1, appoints the following 16 tenderers to the panel to provide legal services at their tendered rates at the best advantage to council. Coots Lawyers and Conveyancers, Denton Australia Limited, Holder Redlich, Lindsay Taylor Lawyers, Local Government Legal, Marsden Law Group, Mitchell Playford Radburn, Moray and Agnew Newcastle, Parker and Cassane Solicitors, Pikes and Vercaches Lawyers, Redenbach Legal, RMB Lawyers, Shaw Reynolds Lawyers, Spark Helmore Lawyers, Swab, Wilshire, Webb, Staunton and Beattie Lawyers. Part 2, note that the contract will run for the period 1st of December 2021 to 30th of November 2026. And Part 3, authorise the General Manager to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affix the seal of council where necessary. For report 20.2, tender VP 231943, tree maintenance and roadside vegetation management services. Council resolved that 1, Council appoints the following 6 tenders to the panel to provide various tree maintenance and roadside vegetation management services for the period 1 November 2021 to 31 October 2024. Environ Group, Lismore Tree Services Proprietary Limited, Richmond Valley Tree Services Proprietary Limited, Savco Vegetation Services, Summit Open Spaces, Tree Services Proprietary Limited, Tree Serve Proprietary Limited. Part 2, provision to be allowed for 2 by 1 year extensions to the contract based on satisfactory contractor performance. And Part 3, the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of council where necessary.
In the item 20.3, tender VP 262603, construct culverts and bridge approach repair on Gores Road. Council resolve that 1, Council accepts the tender from Somerville Excavator Hire, which represents the best value for Council at $266,186.36 exclusive of GST. And 2, the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of council where necessary.
In relation to item 20.4, tender VP 263156, design and construct unnamed bridge on Elliots Road, Myrtle Creek. Council resolved that 1, accepts the tender from MSC Civil New South Wales Proprietary Limited, which represents the best value for council at $298,720.55 exclusive of GST. And 2, authorises the General Manager to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of council where necessary.
In item 20.5, tender VP 262608, Floodworks Package 2, Codrington Coracai Culverts, design and construct. Council resolves that 1, Council accepts the tender from Kyogle Earthworks, which represents the best value for Council at $652,559.10, exclusive of GST. And 2, the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of council where necessary.
Item 20.6, tender VP 262609, design and construct piling and causeway, Upper Cherry Tree Road embankment. Council resolved that 1, declines all submissions received for tender VP 262609, detailed design and construct piling and causeway, Upper Cherry Tree Road embankment, due to all submissions being either higher than the budget allocated for the works, not meeting the project scope, or were non-conforming. 2, apply clause 1783E of the Local Government General Regulation 2021 to authorise the General Manager to enter into direct negotiations with suitably qualified contractors with a view to obtaining delivery of the priorities within the project scope and the approved Transport for New South Wales budget, and to finalise the terms of the contract or agreement and affixing the seal of council where necessary. 3, note that the outcomes of the negotiations will be reported to council for information at a future meeting.
In the item 20.7, tender VP 264776, design and construct culverts, Barragunda and Busby's Flat Roads. Council resolves that 1, council accepts the tender from Somerville Excavator Hire, which represents the best value for council at $63,222, exclusive of GST. And 2, the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of council where necessary.
And finally, with regards to item 20.8, tender VP 262610, Ainsworth Road embankment and culvert works, council resolved that 1, council accepts the tender from MCS Civil, which represents the best value and outcome for council at $640,816.45, exclusive of GST, and the General Manager be authorised to negotiate and finalise the terms and conditions of any contract or agreement in line with the content of this report and the available budget, and affixing the seal of council where necessary.
So thank you, gallery staff and councillors, for your attendance, and those who took the time to watch on live stream, and everyone please keep safe. I now close the meeting. Thank you.